So today's video is not going to be my normal educational offering. It's going to be more akin to an adventure story. And I'm not talking, an Indiana Jones, you're going along for a treasure map. No, I'm talking warfare. There's going to be obstacles. There are going to be things popping up that want to bite me. There will be cursing. There will likely be blood. And I do not know if we will be successful in this adventure. Likelihood is we won't. But I've got to be successful because I have yet another wedding coming up. This time it's for my niece, so I need to make something extra special. And this adventure, well, the whole reason for it is I'm just going to do it. I'm going to throw my dad under the bus. He's screwed up. And he's given me this nightmare that I've got to somehow fix. And I don't know if I can. So what I have here is a pecan bowl that my dad poured, July of 2021. Anybody see an issue with it? I mean, we are looking at something that is 19 inches wide and will probably return something 7 inches tall. A nice sized bowl, no cracks in it. It is dried pretty well if Dad hadn't done a fatal error and screwed the whole thing up. Do you know the number of times he has come up to me when I'm turning green bowls, roughing them out, getting them prepared to sit on a shelf and dry for a few years, and told me, oh, you're going it too thin. You gotta use the 10% rule. Y'all know what the 10% rule is? 10% rule. Here's a blank that I turned out, nice spalting and stuff like that. Let's look at the measurements of it. We are talking under 10 inches. So 10% of 10 is 1 inch. So look at that. It is over 1 inch thick. Notice how? Nice and round. This is dry. It's been drying for probably about 5 years. I could turn a very nice bowl out of that. Here's another one that I did. You can see the wax on the interior. It's all getting ready to dry up. How wide is it? Well, we are looking at a little over 11 inches. So a little over an inch, and we have roughly an inch right here. Not so good there, but still savable. What do we have here? We have a bowl that is 19 inches wide. So you need almost 2 inches of thickness. And how much did he leave me? 1.25 inches. Why is that important? Well, let's take some key measurements right here. The outside of this is 17.5 inches. The inside of this is almost 17 inches. How the hell can you turn something around if its outside is longer than its inside? Ah! But damn, if this isn't a pretty piece of wood. There's got to be something I can do to it to make a cool wedding gift. I just don't know what yet. So, this video, here's the adventure. Physics, mathematics tells us we aren't going to succeed. I'm going to make some decisions. I don't know what they are yet. I'll kind of walk through my thinking of why I'm making those decisions. And y'all can make fun of me in the comments telling me why those decisions are absolutely idiotic. Here we go. Now, in every movie I've ever seen, the hero always gets himself in unnecessary danger by taking unnecessary risks. So we want to be safe here. I need to somehow secure this really tightly, so I need to re-true up the tenon because it is oblong. It won't fit in a chuck. And once I do that one, we can turn this thing pretty safely. Normally I would do that by putting it between centers, but I don't trust the thickness of this bowl. I think Dad made it a little bit thin right here, so I don't think that's an option. So to be safe, we got to be a little dangerous. I need a towel. Yeah, that should work. Need It's not round anymore, so hopefully the towel will take up a little bit of slack. Get out of here. And now we just need to get the tailstock in the center. Put a little pressure on. And then kind of balance it out. I think we got it there. And then we can retrip the tenon. So here's the chuck I'm going to be using to turn it. We have my chuck jaws, and they are about, I probably need to get it right about 4 1/4 inches across at the bottom of the dovetail. Now, you might not be able to see it at this particular angle, but this, can you tell, it's not straight, it's not horizontal, it's not even with this right here going horizontal. It's kind of dovetailed out a little bit so that it will fit in these jaws. And notice how deep these jaws are. Is this tenon is only about half that depth, because I don't want them to go to the bottom of the jaws. I just need it to grip a little bit. And because I'm worried about the bottom of this, I don't want to come in too much farther. So I probably need to bring this down to about 4 1/4 inches, which gives me roughly a 1/4 inch I can come in on this to make it perfectly round. So the first thing I'm going to do is make it flat so I can get that measurement on a nice piece of wood. I'm going to be using my spindle gouge for reshaping the tenon, but I will switch to a bowl gouge in a second for other work. The little point was too narrow, that broke off, and that shifted the whole thing over. But you could see I was taking more wood off of this side than this side, which told me that this was probably flattened whenever he first turned it, so I didn't quite have it perfect. So I need to come down on this side a tad bit. We're not talking much, but that right there, if it was perfectly, it would probably be scraping here and here and skipping a bit right there and there for the warpage. So you would get opposite sides touching. It's one of those things that if you're only touching on one and not the other side, something's off. If you're skipping both these sides, it's the opposites you need to focus on. So I'm a little bit off right here, so just a couple whacks. Let's see if that takes care of it. I'm also going to wedge this piece off right here. With that, I can now slow it down and get my measurement. And it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to make it. 4 1/4 inches is way out here. This thing is warped too much for me to get 4 1/4 inches. I've got to remove this tenon and come in from this side over here and just create a whole new tenon. Shit. So since that's the case, I might as well just take it off the lathe and remove this by hand with a plane or a chisel so that I can reestablish a center point more in the spot that I want than where the wood wanted me to be, because it's warped out of center. More work. So with that in mind, it's time to draw out the draw knife. It's amazing how these old old school tools can really help out in a pinch. All I want to do is flatten this one section. So just like flattening the leg, there we go. Nice and flat, ready to be centered. So as I recenter this, I've been working on it for about 3 minutes now. So you can just kind of take something that's not moving. A lot of times you'll see me just use my thumb right here. But what I'm doing is I've got this hand and I'm finding the high point of one side. So right now, and if you look, it's generally going to be right at the center of the pith up there. So if I find that high point right there, if I don't move my pencil, it goes down and it comes back up. So my hand is on bottom, my hand is up top, and they're about even. Okay? Also notice that it's coming this way and that way about even too, or as good as I'm going to get it. Okay? So that is now centered. Now a lot of times when I tighten this up, you can see it might shift a little bit. So I only tighten the two things and then I will check it a little bit because you just don't know. At least that's how I recenter it. And you might notice because I flattened it off, I have a bunch of little pinpricks. So what I might do is if it's off one way, the other, I'll kind of come halfway and then I'll just loosen and move it over a tad bit. And you're just pushing in hard enough to hold it, not necessarily make it secure. So once I've got it fairly secure, that's when I'll put a little bit more pressure in and that drives that tip down farther. But once again, keep checking it because it kind of goes out around when you do that sometimes. It's about as good as I'm going to get it. Now since I'm coming totally in from the side, I'm now going to switch to a bowl gouge. A deep flute bowl gouge for the simple reason I want to slice this edge a little bit more. And when I'm at the slicing angle, because of this one, spindle gouge has a shallow flute, this edge isn't scraping anymore. So I want to cut the fibers and then scrape to get them out. And I'll be a little bit more efficient, a little bit more controlled that way. Also, now that I'm just resetting the tenon totally, I'm going to go with a bigger tenon. It's obviously Dad did it for these jaws, 4 1/4. But to me, a 19-inch bowl, you know, it just demands a little bit more. So I'm going to go with these jaws, which require about a 5 1/2 to 5 1/4 inch tenon, and I would just feel much more secure with this size tenon on this size bowl, especially since I'm making a foot that's going to be at least 1/3 of the width because I want this bowl to be used. So here we go. Now please notice I'm going slow simply because right now a towel is holding on it. Normally I'm a little bit more gorilla fisted and hammer through this kind of stuff, but when you're turning on the very outside, you are applying a lot more torque than you realize. When you get closer to the inside, you know, the bowl is applying a lot more torque in the battle between the two of you. Right now, I don't want to overpower the holding power of a towel. So I'm taking it nice and slow. So there's a hard line I'm going for the outside of my tenon right there. That's a little over 5 inches. And this being a 19-inch bowl, 1/3 of that is roughly, I want to say, a little over 6 inches. I'm going to have to break my rule a little bit. I'm going to go for an 8-inch foot. So that's going to put my foot right there. I'm trying to save as much material as possible here. So I'm actually going to create a recess for this tenon and trying to leave this material out here so I can play with it. I'm not sure if this is going to work the way I'm thinking, but if the bottom of the interior of the bowl comes into where the tenon is and I leave that little meat there and just kind of put a little decoration on it, maybe I won't blow out the bottom. Okay, so we're just going to create a little bit of a recess. These jaws are a little under a ½ inch, so I need to have at least a ½ inch recess going into the dovetail so that these can sneak in. Now I have this scraper. I don't know if I made it or I bought it this way, but if you'll notice that this is at a slight angle down this way, and that's an angle. And it's designed so I can come in and I can come out to the outside for when I want to come spread out. But I'm not doing that this time. And for some reason I could probably, because that's at an angle, just plunge this in and scrape it, but I think I'm going to use a skew instead because it's more of a negative rake, and I'm worried about the torque on the applying a lot of torque when I'm just using a towel. And this is a little bit over a ½ inch, so I can just kind of measure it like that, and I should be able to just come in, and this will create the right dovetail angle for that tenon. It's already dull, not cutting. That's the disadvantage of using a skew, because this angle is so acute, you lose the edge. But you can always put a burr on it, which is what I'm doing. I'm just going to have to really resharpen this better next time. So a little bit like that. I've got the slightest of burr, and it should start cutting again. It's amazing how what sharpening does, right? Look at that. Shavings again. Now to remove the rest of that, I'm returning to my spindle gouge because of the angles. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about by the angles, see my video on 4 cuts. It'll probably explain it a lot more than I am right now. But you can see what I'm talking about because I'm getting curls instead of just, you know, kind of scraper shavings. So now let's get this thing safely mounted. And I hope y'all notice that I spent very little time in the line of fire. I was always over here or I was over there while it was spinning. Safety 5th or 6th, remember that. So I'm swapping out the jaws to the bigger jaws. And I'm using Dad's lathe for one of the first times. And this is weird. I always like to use these little magnetic trays that holds the screws up. And you know, it sticks to steel, right? I thought the lathe weights were steel, but magnets don't stick to it. I mean, even really strong magnets like this right here, I mean, that's steel. I'm pretty sure it's not aluminum. I mean, it's welded to steel. Why would that not be magnetic? Just a curiosity. You got any explanations down below? So with the jaws swapped out, we can get this thing safely mounted. Key thing is, make sure that those jaws are against a solid surface. Meaning the tenon doesn't bottom out in the jaws. I don't know why I do this one, but I always go around a couple times and tighten from each side because it just seems to tighten up more when I do that one. Can't explain it. Then we get the ever important Pac-Man tennis ball for the live center. That's simply because I don't want to put dimple on the bottom because once again, man, I am not sure about this. Dimple might punch me through. And this isn't going to do that much. It's just for my peace of mind. There we go. Look at that. Totally not round. The first thing I think I want to do is true up this face to give me something to start working with. Just go left-handed, so I stay out of the firing line. This is starting to hurt, so we're getting the glove on. Okay, let's see where we're at. I cut all the way around. Some really pretty spalting. See if I can make it prettier. Oh yeah, those colors are going to be nice. Really nice spalting action coming along here. Kind of perplexed on what to do next though, because I can't just start cutting in this way because it just all goes away. I could probably clean up the interior because that's, even if it's warped, it would, and maybe just as I come out do, or maybe I could just do the same on the bottom of the base. I think this is one of those times where I just need to sleep on it and think it over and see how to progress. But we've got it mounted at least. That's something, isn't it? I mean, if it blows up now, it's my fault, not Dad's. Okay, so it's been about 4 days since I've decided to sleep on it. I think I've come up with a plan. I'm not really sure it's a good plan. But I'm going to break it up into, I believe, 4 sections, okay? The first 2 sections I can turn, and I'm fairly confident on. Because when a bowl warps, you know, the bowl kind of warps this way. So the bottom of it stays somewhat flat. I mean, y'all saw in the video when it's spinning, you know, it's only moving maybe a ½ inch more, where the top was moving, you know, quite a bit. So I think I can shape the bottom and maybe come up a little bit using gouges. Then that's step 1. It's to shape kind of the bottom half of the outside. And then the bottom half of the inside, I believe I can turn. My problem is I come out time and time again, and I'm quite confident I'm about to make a funnel because I believe the bottom of this is in the tenon of that. And whenever it widens out, a common thing when you rough out a bowl is the interior widens quicker than the exterior. So while I think from about here up, that is about where the tenon is, I'm pretty sure I'm in the tenon. So it's going to get really thin right about here, and then it gets thicker up here, and then right here it's all warped out. So I believe from about the center to about that point, I could just make it a smooth, and then this top section I'll just have to figure out what to do at a later date. So that's step 1 and 2 of the plan. Step 3 is I can't have a flat rim, and I need to shape it. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that one, because it's quite obviously I can't turn it to get the shape I want. Or I could, but it wouldn't be pretty. And then the 4th step is I still don't know how to make the transition from a shaped rim to a round circle through an outer round section. I'm going to push that off to the side and just worry about the 2 parts that I can do now, and then I'll figure out the 3rd part, and then the 4th section will just come to us. Yeah, that's the plan. It's just going to come to us. So looking here, right where the tip of my pencil is, that's where the outside diameter of what I want my foot to be. I kind of like the general curve that was established when Dad roughed it out. I don't really know what he was planning with this big thing right here. Maybe that was his initial planned foot. But I'm going to try to blend this curve and to reverse it at the very end towards that little section right there. And I want to blend it closer to this pencil point so that I can maintain that meat for whenever I hollow out the inside. Oh, and this being out wonky. I really need to turn the speed up, but I can't, so... So you might notice when I'm blending these, I'm purposely touching the heel first, and as I move around, I'm blending that tip around so that the cutting edge slowly engages. And a lot of this is just trust that it's actually cutting, because whenever it's going around, it's cutting such few amounts of fibers in the beginning that, again, it's just kind of trust that you're cutting until you start getting farther in, and then you're engaging more and you get more shavings, so you know you're cutting, can establish your shape. Because I'm trying to start blending way up here so that when I get down here, I'm getting more and more into solid wood. See how the shape is kind of bad transitions there where I'm cutting way up here, then it dives down the engagement point, but it doesn't come up as high on this side. I'm not sure if this is working. I really don't like this harsh transition right here. Now right here where I'm starting to get into cutting air, and I'm doing a shear scraping cut, I am putting a lot of pressure down on my tool rest to stabilize it, because a shear scraping cut demands a little bit of pressure going in, and that just makes things bounce. So a lot of my pressure right now is turning this into a pivot point with a lot of pressure here and just a little pressure on the back. Okay, step one about best as I can do. Now on to step two. Now here, other than right where the tennis ball was touching, I have a lot of meat that I can work with. So I can come out quite a bit over here to try and figure something out. I don't really know what's going to happen, so we'll just get after that. Now because it's so thin there, I think I'm going to have to do something that I almost never do, is I'm going to have to scrape most of this. I don't think I'm going to be able to do much to cut it with a gouge. With that in mind, let's go ahead and set up a platform for scraping, because I'm going to be resharpening a lot. And I'm using the very scientific method of just taking the same angle that was on it the last time. Okay, with the idea that we can't remove too much from the center, let's start about right there. And once again, speed would be my friend if I could use it at all. So my microphone crapped out last night, and that's why you had to endure that montage. So let me catch you up, because basically I have completed my stage 1 and stage 2, turning the somewhat still flat areas on the base and the top. I will tell you, I was really getting frustrated, and I'm not quite sure how to do that transition from stage 3 to stage 4, but as I said, we're pushing that off right now. What's happening is on the inside, I was actually able to turn all the way up here. And as you see, as you turn it, it kind of wavers down, and comes back about right there and comes down. And where my finger is a very decided ledge, okay, coming through. Well, the same thing's kind of happened to the other side. Only there's more pronounced, and I have a little bit of tear out right here, but you can see it's cutting, and then it comes down, and then it comes all the way up here, And over here, I made the mistake thinking that, well, maybe I could just engage at the highest point coming in. But as you can see, I basically shaved that right there. But that transition kind of, it's just too steep. So that was a mistake. So I've basically got this kind of wave going around inside and outside. I'm moving on from there. I then went to step 3. We're now dealing with just focusing on the rim. I'm going to take advantage that this is still flat right now before I start shaping it. And whenever I do rim designs, I never really like this distance right here to be the same as this distance. So I came over and I figured out what roughly 2/3 was. I took that measurement, I put that on a standard flat working gauge, and then I measured that distance all the way around from the top. And then I scoured the shop because I remember my dad having one of these power carvers. And what they are is it's kind of an impact gun. This is a Ryobi back when they were, blue and red. I think this was in their industrial section tools. They don't make it anymore. I know my dad really loved it so much that he bought 2 of them. I just couldn't figure out where he put them. And basically you have these interchangeable carving gouges, just like the hand ones I use. But the difference is it's on kind of a impact. So you turn it on, and it doesn't do anything until you come down, and then it vibrates forward. And I figured that would make it easier for me to put some kind of ledge right here. So I can just press forward and it'll carve out along that line. So you are now caught up. I'm just going to go ahead and start carving this all the way around. I'll probably have to go around a couple times to get to the depth I want. But at least that way, when people come over and pick up the bowl, this cosmetically will be even all the way around, which is what I was going for. Even though it's warped, I wanted the ledge not to look wonky. Okay, I've got that nice undercut rim now, which I think is going to work. Then when Dad roughed this out, this outside edge has a slight curve to it. I'm going to take advantage of that and just leave it. I've got to remove a lot of the wax that's still on it from when it was drying, but I think I'll remove the wax and just sand that smooth. The next part is shaping this. And once again, I'm going back to that 2/3 rule. I'm going to take this distance, which was 2/3 of this distance, and come back up to the top about there. And that's where I'm going to have the apex of a curve. So it's going to kind of dive a little bit farther in here and just roll over there. So right now I just need to establish that line all the way around. And now the hard part is to figure out how to curve this. I've been thinking about it. Obviously I can't turn it because you can see my turning lines, they go on and off, on and off. So I think this is a perfect use of a spoke shave. So I've got 2 spoke shaves here. This one I've made out of a kit from Ron Hawk. I believe he still makes that. And this is something I made back in the early aughts. I've got this one set up for a heavy cut. And then here's just a standard, I want the flat one. This is the round one, but it's just a Lee Valley one. And I typically set this one up for a fine cut. So this one does the rough work, and then I'll go back over on the fine work. And I think the idea is I'm just going to kind of round it over to that line on this side, round it over to that line on that side. But notice that the grain direction is coming straight over here. So I'm going to have to come this way and then this way, so I'm always laying those fibers down. And I'll put a link to a video I did all about grain direction if that doesn't make sense to you. So I guess it's just a matter of locking my spindle and getting after it. That made really quick work to get the shape I wanted. This inside lip is just a little bit lower than that outside, so the curve is somewhat consistent. I'm just now going to hit it with a little bit of sandpaper to remove my tool marks and that last little bit of sanding, but that was a lot quicker than if I just sanded it. Okay, so I've got the shaping done for step 1 and 2. Step 3 is now shape. You know, obviously I still got to do all the finish sanding and stuff like that. I have come up with an idea on the transition for this part. I kind of like how this V carving turned out. I think it'll turn out even better when I hit the bottom portion with a little bit of sandpaper. So I think what I want to do is take this curved undulation where it kind of comes down here, then comes back up, and duplicate that on that, and then just kind of bring this entire section in between there down via those carving tools. And you know, it'll probably take me 4 or so hours, but basically have it smooth, textured, and then smooth, and this undulating curve might work out. So the first thing I need to do is just come up with a smooth curve that follows the undulation. Something like that, if you can see it wandering around. And then I'm going to do a V carve following that shape. Right now I'm kind of ignoring grain direction. I'm just establishing the groove. It doesn't seem to be doing much tear out, but I will take grain direction into consideration when I make the V-notch a little bit deeper. So the texturing I'm thinking of is just little scoops. So one of the chisels that it has is this pretty deep scoop right here. So all I really need to do is loosen this. Swap in a new chisel. Then all this center section, which still has wax on it, I'm going to bring it down to the bottom of these 2 V-cut levels. So it's all going to reduce just 1 scoop at a time. So I'm going to lock the steering head so that can't move. And I guess just spend the next few hours doing nothing but this. Okay, I'm an hour into lowering this whole trouble zone section, and I've learned a few things using this power curver. First, you still have to sharpen it a lot. I set up my strobe on my small lathe, and that's been doing pretty good. I go over there every 5 minutes or so, just give it a few once-overs. Second, you can't ignore the normal carving rules of going with the grain, that kind of stuff. It might be powered, but you can't lift up. Hence, what I've found is if I go from an area that is not carved to an area that's carved, I'm not lifting up the fibers because there are no fibers there. I'm just kind of scooping half of it and it just pops off. So I'm going from uncarved to carved area, works much better. Second thing, when I get to really hard sections like the heartwood, this is pecan. I would never hand carve fully dried pecan. There's a reason why they call it pecan crease. Well, a little, I've got labeled DNA, but denatured alcohol, but I only use the stuff you buy at the liquor store, so it doesn't have the poisons in it. I wouldn't use real denatured alcohol, but spritzing it down kind of lubricates the blade going through the really hard heartwoods a lot easier, and it just works better. And the denatured alcohol dries up pretty fast, but as you can see, going through the heartwood, a lot easier that way. Just a few lessons learned from sitting here for an hour and only getting through about a quarter of it. I think I said this was going to take me about 4 hours. Looking at the clock, that's about right. Constantly going back and re-polishing that edge to get a nice clean cut. I will say when I first started out, I wasn't paying attention to grain direction and I got a lot of tear out, which I've been going back and forth on that. Just cleaning up those little spots. My worst spots are with the V gouge that I did earlier, but if you know anything about, hand tool carving, it's always one side or the other with a V gouge. So I've just got this little bit right here, and then I'm just going to lightly go over it so I get rid of all the pointy parts on top, and I'm going to declare this done. Just straight off the blade and the gullets, and I think it'll polish up nice. After that, we'll turn to the interior and figure out how to deal with that ledge. I think I might use a scraper. Okay, now to scrape out the interior, I'm going to use a card scraper, but after all this carving, my back's getting kind of sore, so I'm going to make it easy on myself. We have this little deal right here, which fits perfectly in your banjo. And then you can kind of position it in lots of different ways. Tie it down, and basically I'm going to take the chuck straight off my lathe and put it right there. And now I can position it at different angles to work it. But we'll get to that tomorrow. So scraping to get rid of all that, the high spots, is not delicate work, so I'm just going to take a, rounded card scraper. And that right there put a rough burr on it, good enough for the work we do. So I'm just going to be scraping and coming back here quite a bit in this next step. So right now I'm just going to, you can see that ridge. I want to make it so it's smooth to the touch. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm just going to get rid of this high spot that I have coming around. And really, the farther down you get, it's not noticeable. So down here, all I got to worry about is getting rid of tear out. So real quickly, I'm just going to hit these high spots that are close to the rim to remove the material, and then we're going to get on to finish sanding. I also need to get rid of some of the wax that's still on here. You can see a scraper like this actually does work, removes a lot more shavings than sanding does. You can see that's it. That's pretty much it right there. And to reposition it, I just loosen this lever, and you can twist it around to wherever you want. We are now so close to being done on this thing. I'm kind of terrified because we still have to remove that tenon. I leave for the wedding tomorrow, and if I blow out the bottom, I don't know what I'm going to do. So on the inside, I'm actually going to hit it with a negative rake scraper to get rid of some of this tear out that was in the punkier stuff. Then we're just going to start going through all the grits and make everything pretty except for the very bottom, which would reverse chuck and cross our fingers we don't destroy the whole thing. So now it's just going to be a matter of sanding, and I hate sanding, but sometimes that's the best cutting tool we got. Now, I am really not a big fan of sanding, but some of the things that make it go easier is if you have some kind of light right here that you can direct it. What you want to do is you want to get the light to cascade so that you can actually see a lot more of the tear out. Have it coming at an angle so that the shadows pop. The other thing is, do as much as you can with your blades, because right now, because of all the weird undulations and stuff like that, I'm going to have to go to all the way down to 80 grit, and I need to stay on 80 grit forever. It's once you get past the shaping, the getting rid of the tear out, that kind of stuff, that you can start going up to the higher grits, and those tend to go faster. So if you're using sandpaper to help shape, stay on the coarsest grit you get for as long as you can until you're just not doing anything more, and then do a little bit more, and then start working your way up through. Because invariably, if you don't do it that way, you'll go up through the grits, and then you'll find some tear out. You'll have to go back down, and then you go up and down. It's actually more efficient just to spend more time than you think you need to on the coarser grits. And put a fan behind you blowing that way with your dust collector somewhere. Not for nothing, but you hear that? Sounded kind of thin there. Okay, my first step is to get basically the bottom of this shelf where it's going to be sitting just dead on perfect. And then I can lower the center section to below that. I'm not going to go fully flat with where the tenon was, just below what this is. You may notice I have that pencil mark right there. I put that on there so that I know once that is gone, I've got that perfectly flat all the way around. So I'm kind of just watching for that pencil mark to disappear, so I know I don't have to take off any more at all. That's pretty much the bare minimum I could take off. So now I'm just going to shape this interior right here. So it's and now just to get it below that line. I'm getting scared. I've got a slight dome on it now. It looks like I've taken it all the way off, but I haven't. I've put a slight dome on it, but it just sounds so thin to me. Okay, that ring right there is just below, so I'm safe. So now to clean it up and put some decorations on it. And with that, all we got left is a little nub. So, okay, I'm a little bit worried still, but let's get it off and see where we're at. So now for a little nub removal. Which for me means a chisel does the bulk of the work and then a knife does the last of it. Make sure it's going to sit flat. Pretty good. Okay, so I would suggest if you're going to sign it before you put oil on it. Started by Jack Graham, July 2021. Finished by Sean Graham, November 2024. Now, normally for a bowl like this, what I would be doing is I would have been using a little bit of shellac when I sanded on it, and that would kind of filled all the pores. That way when I put oil in it, not as much oil would absorb. So it wouldn't get as deep into the wood and take forever to dry. It might take a few days to dry out. To fully cure, the final part, and I don't really know when my mic went out, but I'll just do a quick review and hopefully I can catch the footage without sound to overlay it. All that work and the money shot is gone, so to speak. But basically what I talked about is I use a technique I use a lot with my boxes because I don't want, a lot of times I'm trying to turn those over pretty quickly for art markets. Normally on a bowl like this, and for the money I would be charging for it, I would spend about a month finishing it. Basically, I would put a good thick coat of oil on it. I prefer Mahoney's walnut oil. It is 100% walnut oil, but he does do some kind of process, some kind of heat treatment that it just seems to cure faster. Anyways, the idea is you oil it once a day for a week, then once a week for a month. And that's about the point where I'm okay with selling it. But if I continue to keep it, I'll be oiling it at least once a month, or actually right before I go to show it. So it looks kind of pretty for the shows and stuff like that. What I did here was I put a very light coat of oil. It would have been really pretty to, just douse the entire thing for the video and kind of rub it around. It gives you a nice pop. But what happens a lot of times if you do that one, you have to put a lot of oil on it, and it takes a few weeks to fully cure. I just wanted a light coat on the top to make the color pop. So I put it on a rag and applied it there. That way there were no areas that got a lot more oil than less, because those, you can kind of see those lines. In fact, there's a video where I started on the top, and as I was working around, you could see where I first put the rag absorbed a little bit more oil. So I had to go over that a few times to get that line to disappear, and you can't see that line anywhere now after about 10 minutes. After that, when I've got a light coat of oil over everything, though granted on the texturing there was no way I was going to get the rag down into everything, so I just dumped oil on those and spread it out with a brush, and then mopped up all the excess I could. But after getting a light coat of oil on it, I like to use a wax on top. My favorite right now is a Citrus Shield from Howard's. It's got a nice smell to it, I think. And basically I use one of those plastic 4/0 steels, and I really work it into the wood. I put way too much on it, and I just sit here and work it for about 10 minutes all the way over, really shoving that wax down into the pores. And then I'm going to go out to lunch for a few hours, and when I come back, it'll kind of have tacked up, and I can buff it with a cotton t-shirt, and it will give me the perfect sheen that I like. It's not quite a polish, but it is a nice sheen. The downside of that one is I can never really take it to a buffing wheel like I do on my long bowls, the bowls that I do over a month at a time, because that kind of oil is truly polymerized and it doesn't have any wax on it, so it won't destroy my buffing wheels. So I can sit there and buff on them and really put a cool finish on it after the fact, after the finish has polymerized, and that gives me the best finish. This just works for quick stuff, and I've got to get this ready to put into a suitcase in about 8 hours, so this is my best option. So that was a good long lunch, and right now it's kind of a little tacky. I don't know how to show that to you. That's just the excess wax. So let me see if I can get a closer view for you. Maybe if you watch the rim right here, you can see, it doesn't take much, but basically I'm going to be buffing it, and then I'll buff it again in the morning or the next day, And the more you buff it, the kind of it gets a nice sheen. And now this is slick, not tacky. But please remember, all these rags that you've seen me using to apply the oil, to buff this out, all that kind of stuff, they are potential fire hazards. So you want to, I typically will throw them in my backyard, spread them out like that. You just want to have constant air flowing over them. You don't want them to bunch them, wad them up so the air isn't moving and you can generate heat in a fire. So just spread them out. Once again, I prefer to throw them out in my backyard for a few days, and then they can go in the trash once they get kind of crunchy. And my last thought on this one is, you know, the coloration is kind of cool. I like the fact that the sapwood is on the bottom, the heartwood is on top. I think it's a cool little effect. But I probably could have gone a 1/4 inch thinner through the midsection. But isn't that always how it is? I hope you enjoyed my little adventure. I am glad it turned out okay. That center section